Hello and welcome to the next excerpt of our Fireside Chat series. I am Jerry Abbey, Director of Product Marketing at Copia Automation, and today I have with me Industry 4.0 expert, Jeff Winter. Jeff, would you mind saying hello to the audience and maybe giving a little background on your expertise?
Sure. So my name is Jeff Winter, and I am the new Vice President of Business Strategy with Critical Manufacturing, an MES software company. And it's my job to basically help point them in the right direction to be a best-in-class MES solution provider, but also an Industry 4.0 solution provider. And in order to be successful at that, I have to be intimately involved with what's happening in the industry, which is why I participate in so many academic groups, industry associations, advisory boards, and even research teams, is so I can stay current on the latest and greatest and share those insights with my company as well as with everyone that likes to follow me on LinkedIn. And that's a big part of why I wanted to get involved in this report that you guys were creating.
Yeah, and thank you again for being involved in it. And it's been a pleasure working with you, not just on this report, but on the State of Smart Manufacturing report that we've worked on for many years now. And congrats again to you on the new role, and congrats to your new employer, because they're getting a wealth of experience and thought leadership, the guidance that any organization will benefit from greatly. So to dive in here, we've got a wide range of topics, but the first one, when we were looking at the first annual State of Industrial DevOps report, it was a lot of data across a lot of different answers. And it's the first time we've ever done a report like this. So naturally, first time you do anything, there might be a couple surprises. Was there anything that struck you that really stood out within the data?
Yes, and this is one where I probably have a more unique perspective than most, because I dove into the raw data with you and spent hours looking at it to help, at least provide my analysis and contribution to the report. One of the big ones that kind of stood out to me was related to the downtime costs. And I remember when you first reached out to me for this report and asked me for some help with the analysis, one of the first things I remember talking to you about was the downtime numbers, that there are quite a few different reports out there and they all have very different numbers. And my advice was, don't just ignore them, look at them, compare them, and even reference them in your report. And you did, which I loved. And so I think you had 4 different reports referenced in there. The problem is the numbers are all over the board. And I'm even familiar with some additional non-public reports that weren't mentioned, such like IoT Analytics that also evaluated this. And yet, once again, they would show even more variability in the numbers. Now, part of the reason I think why there's such a variability in this is twofold. First, I don't think everyone, or even most people, actually know the answer to how much an hour of downtime costs. So they guess. And second, it all depends on how you define downtime. Is it a single asset? Is it entire production facility or the company? And some of those have never happened for an organization, which just means they're theoretical numbers. But based on the fact that your average downtime cost went up dramatically on when evaluating against the revenue of the company and based on the PLC count, that would imply to me it's more based off the facility of the organization being down instead of just an individual asset. But regardless of which of the numbers you selected for the downtime cost, where it's the low end or the high end, it is absolutely, it is and it should change the way that investments are made. And the higher the number that you use, the bigger impact that this can have on the way companies allocate their money for a lot of things that they do. So it is important for every company to figure out what their hour of downtime is. Even if the industry averages are all over the board, figure out your specific company's downtime.
Totally. Great advice. And I remember going back and forth with you and digging, honestly, spending hours just on that alone, trying to find every research report I possibly could. And the numbers out there were all over the place. So it really, going back to your last bit of advice there, just everybody dig in and figure out what your number is and try to stick to that with some structure is great. A great way to move forward with this. Now, we talked about so many different parts and pieces of this survey. What were some of the most powerful data points that stood out to you?
So I would say one insight or finding is what I would call it was actually related to a series of 3 questions or 3 data points. It was related to the code review process, the time spent on code review, and how much time teams spent debugging code. And as you know, 99% said that they have a code review in place. 81% spend 4 hours or less a month reviewing code, yet an average of 45 hours a month debugging code. That data is impactful because it reveals a critical imbalance in how teams approach code quality. And while nearly everyone has a code review process, so they say, in place, the fact that most spend less than 4 hours a month on it, yet dedicate more than 10 times that amount debugging, that's a huge red flag. It's like spending all your time fixing leaks in a boat rather than sealing the cracks in the first place. So for decision makers and those considering industrial DevOps adoption, this data point is crucial because it highlights the inefficiencies that stem from broken processes. So instead of being proactive with thorough code reviews, teams are just stuck in being reactive and fixing problems. And the cost of this lost time and productivity could be significantly reduced with more attention to code review. And it's a clear signal that adopting better practices early on can save a massive amount of headache and even money and time in the future.
I love that you called out that series. So I've been using that in presentations. I presented to at 2 automotive conferences in the last 3 weeks. And on that particular slide, I saw more heads nodding, people smiling, laughing because they acknowledged it, came up and talked to me about it afterwards. It's such a resonant piece of data put together and laid out for people to talk about. So while that was maybe the most powerful piece of data, what were some of the top takeaways holistically looking at the report to you?
So I'm going to say it a slightly a different way and answer like, why should you read the report? And one of the things I really liked about this report, more than a lot that I read, was the overall structure. You explained what industrial DevOps is. You gave an overview of its history. You explain how it fits within digital transformation. Then you go over all the findings of your report, and then you end with 6 pages on actionable insights and steps to take, not just a couple bullets. So overall, this helped me on my own understanding of industrial DevOps. And as a result, yes, I end up buying the book.
It's great. I love that book. So I had a fireside chat with Suzette just the other day. Great conversation. Just, it's so good bringing the community together. And like you talked about education earlier, the shared education of our community within manufacturing and distribution through reports like this, through hard research that went into that book, and other papers and reports that are out there. And I really appreciate all the LinkedIn posts that you put out there that aggregate data for people to digest and bring into their decision-making day to day. So moving into the next thing and thinking about that bite-sized pieces of information and thinking about how you can use takeaways and the data here and our conversation today. We look at Industry 4.0 and there are so many different things to unpack. We see that industrial DevOps is a growing space. There are more and more people talking about it, but how often do you hear conversations around industrial DevOps?
So in the past few years, I've been hearing about all sorts of XOps methodologies or practices. You have your DevOps, your Data Ops, your ML Ops, your SecOps, your DevSecOps, your GitOps, just to name a few. And they embody a broader movement to enhance collaboration, automation, and efficiency by combining various IT-related disciplines with operational practices. Now, DevOps, I think, is one of the earliest, if I get it right. I think it kind of started around 2009, and I believe it was kind of as a response to the need for greater collaboration between software development and IT operations teams. And the goal was to shorten development cycles, increase deployment frequency, and deliver high-quality software reliably. And as the oldest one of a lot of the ones I hear about, it's also the most well-known and established within the IT world. I don't hear many people in the manufacturing function talking as much about these concepts as I do the IT teams. So industrial DevOps specifically kind of originated from the applications of DevOps principles, and it was originally designed to improve collaboration from the software development to the IT operations within industrial environments, and not just manufacturing, but also like energy and other industrial sectors. And as these industries started going under, and still are, digital transformation and adopting technologies that all fall under the umbrella of Industry 4.0, especially around IoT and IIoT, the need to bridge the gap between IT and OT started to become really important, not just important, but necessary. This convergence has led to adopting DevOps practices to address the unique challenges of different industrial settings, such as real-time system control, safety protocols, and even regulatory compliance. And so as it continues to evolve to incorporate advanced technologies, even all the way up to like artificial intelligence, machine learning, and it focuses on emphasizing automation. It's now, getting its fingers into continuous improvement and enhanced collaboration just across teams to do anything related to optimizing industrial processes and ultimately probably reduce downtime. So am I hearing a lot about it? Honestly, not as much as you might say, but should it be talked about more? Yes, absolutely yes, especially as IT and OT continue to converge and manufacturing becomes more digitized and reliant on software. Like I said, I'm hearing it a lot from the IT side, but not as much from the operations, production, maintenance, engineering sides.
That totally resonates with all the conversations I've been having the last couple of weeks at those conferences. As I mentioned, it's been the younger generation that is more IT traditionally trained and has come into the OT space and looked to transfer that and has shown great interest in IT. And as you mentioned, and as we've talked about in the past, I truly see industrial DevOps as a bridge connecting IT and OT. And I don't want to diverge too far here, but I believe this will eventually lead to a re-architecture of how organizations are creating the IT and OT teams to force that collaboration rather than allow that wall to keep them divided. And thinking about that, we've talked in the past a bunch about operations and connecting the dots for operations leaders. How do you connect the dots from here for those operations leaders thinking about industrial DevOps in their day-to-day?
I think the biggest thing is for the leaders in operations to even understand what this is and the value it provides. And so probably the way that I would say it, if I were to talk to, let's just say like a plant manager, someone at that level that's responsible for their production facility, is to think of industrial DevOps kind of like a team huddle that brings everyone from the IT folks to the plant floor operators onto the same page to tackle your everyday challenges. So instead of dealing with constant equipment glitches or slow production tweaks or just miscommunications between departments, industrial DevOps encourages collaboration and uses smart automation to keep things running smoothly. It's about streamlining processes so you spend less time putting out fires and more time boosting productivity and efficiency. So in short, it's a practical approach to make your operations more agile and resilient without adding extra headaches to your day.
That's super helpful. And that firefighting resonates so much. Like we've seen it in the data in the report, where people talked about all the ad hoc fixes they were doing. Almost 80% of the survey said that ad hoc fixes were common on the plant floor because they're fighting those fires against having downtime, trying to get back up and running. And I know you've laid out some practical advice. Do you have other practical advice, and maybe specific to different leadership roles that people are actively in or could move into by leveraging this information and having a vision for how the future of industrial DevOps and operations are impacted?
So as we both kind of agreed, it's not talked about as much as it probably should be from the operations side of manufacturers. So getting top level support is key to making industrial DevOps work smoothly. Leadership roles like the CIO, the CTO, and the COO are essential because they have a direct hand in technology decisions and operational efficiencies. But I would bet almost every CIO and maybe even most CTOs know what it is. I don't know that all COOs do. Now, plant managers and operations directors are crucial also because they're at the front lines of production. But to get their buy-in, it's all about connecting this concept of industrial DevOps to their specific goals, which are usually around things like either managing or improving productivity, managing and reducing downtime and just cutting costs oftentimes. So share real world examples or quick wins to show how this approach can make their lives easier and the operations more profitable. And when they see how it aligns with their objectives, they're more likely to champion the initiative. And if that doesn't work, just casually mention that your biggest competitor has already started deploying industrial DevOps methodologies and seeing significant gains.
I like that last piece of advice, but all of it is so practical. And thinking about, honestly, the biggest competition to technological transformation typically is the status quo. Do you have any practical advice to bridge across the status quo and get people really motivated beyond that last point, talking about the competition? I mean, the competitive edge is an ever-present piece to be thinking about. So I'm reading Scrum again, probably for the third time in the last 2 years. And Jeff Sutherland points out multiple times and quoted himself from meetings with big companies like Bell Labs saying, change or die. This is the new way to work. So I know I just jumped around a little bit, but any thoughts there?
Well, it's funny how in some companies, the IT and the OT teams are like two neighbors who share a fence but never talk, both working hard on their own yards, but missing out on the great barbecue that they could have together. It's another analogy I like to use is it's kind of like running a three-legged race without coordinating with the other person. You're bound to stumble and fail, even if you're both super strong runners on your own. And IT and OT collaboration are essential, like I said, for Industry 4.0 or just industrial digital transformation to happen. It's not an option; it's a requirement. And DevOps is one of the many ways that can help with this journey of bringing these two departments together. And so there's three pieces of advice I would give here. First is build empathy through shared experiences. You need to encourage team members to step into each other's worlds. Have IT folks spend a day on the factory floor to see the machinery in action, and let the OT staff sit in the IT planning meetings and sit in their chairs. This helps both sides appreciate each other's challenges and foster mutual respect. The second one is create cross-functional teams. You need to break down these work silos by forming project teams that include both IT and OT professionals on them. For example, when implementing a new automation system, involve representation from IT on the solution right away. This not only combines their expertise, but it also aligns them towards the common goal, which the best way to get two teams working together is to give them the same goal. And the last one is establish open communication channels. You need to set up regular meetings and shared communication platforms where both teams can exchange ideas, updates, and even concerns. Even just a shared chat group or any sort of collaborative software out there can make it easier for everyone to stay connected and address issues properly. And so by taking these steps, companies can turn that awkward three-legged race into something that's more of a regular smooth sprint of two people running together with everyone on the same page.
Which paints a beautiful picture of having that team working together, moving in the same direction for something that, like, on the surface is simple. We all have the same goal in an organization, that we want the organization to be successful, and finding and aligning those goals so that people feel that they're tied and going in the same direction. I love that. So Jeff, for organizations that are just starting off on their DevOps, industrial DevOps journey, what do you see as the crucial steps to set the right foundation forward?
This is a great question. And I think it mostly depends on your company's current level of DevOps maturity. Because if your organization's already very familiar with DevOps, it's a lot easier to just start focusing on taking those methodologies just into the industrial part of your business. You can leverage your existing DevOps practices just directly with OT, operational technology systems. For example, you can start to apply your CI/CD pipelines to industrial software. This is especially true for anything from industrial control systems to SCADA, PLCs. You can also implement infrastructure as code for OT, allowing you to manage industrial infrastructure configurations just using open source automation tools like Ansible or Puppet to ensure consistency and enable quick recovery in case of failures. But you can also enhance your monitoring and even your logging. You can extend your IT monitoring, to include your industrial equipment and assets, allowing for real-time insights and even help with predictive maintenance, just using tools like Prometheus and Grafana. But for companies unfamiliar with DevOps or not mature in DevOps, it's important to start with just the basic DevOps practices within your IT team before you start to tackle your industrial DevOps practices and methodologies. You want to start to introduce them with your IT operations teams first, lay the foundation, build the necessary skills and culture, because it will end up spending a lot more time there anyways. So for this, you can start to utilize just resources from reputable organizations like the DevOps Institute to help you with kind of foundational courses and even certifications. And if you want the technical side, you can even go right to all the major cloud providers. All of them have DevOps engineering certificates. And you could also just implement core DevOps tools and practices for things that you should have in place anyways, like version control, recovery backups, just basic CI/CD, and just containerization orchestration. Actually, Copia is a great example that can help with this. But most importantly, you need to start to get the culture to understand what this is and build a DevOps culture within the organization.
Love that. Great advice across the board. And I love that you ended on culture, because that's such a huge part of any change. And it's one of those things that I feel like is often overlooked without assigning people to driving roles, to be a driving force and champion for the organization, to unify people and make that change impactful and happen. Thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome.
Shifting a little bit here and thinking about the goals of an organization, we talked in the report, and we've talked in the past a bunch about security. What are your thoughts here about cybersecurity and the security of the organization, where that fits in and how this impacts it?
Well, that's basically what DevSecOps is designed to do. Now we're just applying it to the industrial side. So integrate security into every step as you bring the IT and OT teams together through the concept of industrial DevOps. So key security priorities should include implementing, if you get to the specific, strong network segmentation to protect critical industrial assets, adhering to industry-specific standards like IEC 62443, which ISA leads the efforts for, and ensuring continuous monitoring and incident response capabilities. But also just fostering a culture where everyone is security aware is essential to guard against any human related risks.
I love that. Everyone being security aware because you are all on the same team, continuing that common theme. So, Jeff, I've really enjoyed our conversation. I think we're coming near the end. Do you have any final thoughts, any other things that we didn't get to that you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, we are in the era of Industry 4.0, whether you like it or not. And merging IT and OT is going to happen, or you won't be around too long. So think of industrial DevOps as your secret weapon to help make this transition smoother. So by getting your tech and your operations teams together and to play nice together, you're going to break down most of the barriers that are hindering your ability to drive real meaningful transformation and even spark innovation. So embrace automation and data-driven decisions to push your processes to a higher level, but don't forget about the security in every step of the way. And sure, there might be bumps along the way. That's normal, that's natural, but these efforts will set you up for success in this really fast-paced changing world of modern manufacturing. So stay adaptable, keep learning, and try to embrace industrial DevOps. It will help you along the way.
I love it. Thank you. Great last thoughts. And thank you to our audience for joining today. If you enjoyed this conversation, please reach out. Jeff and I are happy to answer any follow-up questions you may have. Thank you again. And thank you again, Jeff. It's been a pleasure working together.
Thanks for having me.